President Trump in the Oval Office was taking questions. And during one of those questions, talking about inflation and oil prices, he let loose that the United States has been conducting an operation to move ships through the Strait of Hormuz under the very noses of the Iranians. That has led to a series of kind of aha moments linking together past stories and also a few other issues that are going on right now. I'm going to put those together for you and talk about what President Trump was discussing, also what Secretary Wright was talking about the day earlier, and kind of discuss the fact that the U.S. has been operating a fleet of vessels that is moving cargo in and out of the Strait of Hormuz, alongside those of the Iranians, which are moving cargo in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. That's right. So we got competing dark fleets here. This is a golden moment here for what's going on with shipping. We're going to break it down for you in this video. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, here's President Trump yesterday in the Oval Office.
You know, I can say it now. Something you didn't know. Do you know we've been taking out millions of barrels of oil? Nobody knows it. You know who doesn't know about it? Iran, until right now. We took out the other night 22 ships, late at night with no lights, because they don't have any radar, because we blasted the crap out of it. We took out, that's why oil's $85 a barrel.
Here's the statement by President Trump over on Truth Social. Last month, I directed our great U.S. military to execute a secret mission, no longer secret, to support oil tankers and other commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Today, I am pleased to announce that this effort has resulted in more than 100 million barrels of oil making its way through the strait and into the open market. More than 200 commercial ships have safely traveled through the strait. This wildly successful effort is because the United States of America controls the Strait of Hormuz, not Iran. Their military is defeated and their economy is lost. It's over for Iran. Okay, hang on a second here. A couple of key elements in this to talk about. 100 million barrels of oil. Now, that is significant, but in the big scheme of things, not that. That is 5 days of pre-war oil coming out of the Persian Gulf. We were moving 20 million barrels a day. More than 200 commercial ships have safely traveled through the strait. There was a report the other day that it was estimated that about 1,000 ships have come through the Strait of Hormuz. And I even talked about it in my last weekly update, talking about the fact that the numbers we see is somewhere in the range of 500. So that would have to be clandestine ships, ships running dark on the AIS. If they are running through this program, that would account for some of that difference. The issue about the United States of America controls the Strait of Hormuz, not Iran, I would argue that it's contested because the U.S. has to escort ships out. That doesn't really signify control. What it does signify is that the U.S. is able to move ships through, but it is not control. And more importantly, Iran has demonstrated its ability to damage some ships, particularly at the beginning of this operation, as we will talk about. So the president's talk in the White House yesterday and that Truth Social post came on the heels of testimony given by Energy Secretary Wright.
Because yesterday you just said that in the Strait of Hormuz, traffic was rising very meaningfully. Is that true? And what does meaningfully mean to you?
That is true. We are not talking overly about it, but this is using the U.S. military to increase flows of oil out of the Strait of Hormuz, and things are going well.
Why the hell would you say that? I mean, seriously, we're not openly talking about it. But, okay, I'll openly talk about it in congressional hearing. Okay. Again, you know, I'm not a secretary, I'm not a member of the administration, but I would think if you're running a clandestine operation to move oil out of the Persian Gulf, maybe not saying it openly would be a smart move in your case.
I'd like to talk a little bit more detail, though, at least more than the word meaningfully. Like, what would you consider meaningful? Like, are we talking about many ships? Are we talking about one ship? Because the IMF Port Watch seems to indicate that it hasn't actually increased meaningfully.
That would be incorrect. That data would be incorrect.
Okay, so you have you have data that shows that there's been a significant increase in the number of ships going through the Strait of Hormuz that would supply the rest of the world with oil.
That's correct.
And these are not Iranian ships. These are ships that would supply us and our allies with oil. But you can't go into detail about exactly how many or what meaningfully means. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I swear, sometimes I do question our appointed leaders. All right, so Secretary Wright, in open hearing, talks about, a covert operation underway to move tankers. President Trump at the White House openly talks about it and then posts about it on Truth Social. And this led me to my aha moment. Now, historians have aha moments when all of a sudden all the pieces of the puzzle come together. It's CSI, Strait of Hormuz, basically. Let me put together what has been happening and try to explain this operation in some detail to you. So you may remember back in the beginning of May, the president announced Project Freedom, which was an effort to bring ships through the Strait of Hormuz. And what we saw is very early on the exit of 2 U.S. flag vessels, the Fairfax Alliance and the CS Anthem. This involved putting embarked crews on the 2 ships, including U.S. Navy tactical advisors to provide secure communications, U.S. Marines to provide point defense against aerial and surface drones, and aerial coverage provided by fixed-wing aircraft and rotary aircraft, including Army AH-64 Apache helicopters from the 82nd Airborne. And initially, the envisionment was Project Freedom would open up the door to start moving ships through. Now, almost immediately, 2 things happened. We saw a series of attacks on ships. So HMM Namu, for example, was hit by, we believe, either an unmanned surface vessel or a missile, probably the latter based on the damage inflicted on this vessel. And we also saw a hit on board the CMA CGM San Antonio. I talked about that in the Week 10 recap, had images and video from the ship showing that damage. At the same time, tanker trackers showed a very large crude carrier of the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, ADNOC, the motor tanker Baqara, coming inbound into the Strait of Hormuz, but the ship was subjected to attack by the Iranians, and actually what we saw was a trail of oil following a possible strike, and also the images of potential fast boats that were following the ship. And what we then heard was an announcement that Project Freedom was going to be put on hold. We're not going to see movement of ships through. However, what appears to have happened is that while that public announcement took place, that's not exactly what happened. And instead, what we saw was the U.S. retool this operation to focus not on the open movement of every ship in and out of the Strait of Hormuz, but very targeted ships coming out. What do I mean? So yesterday, Bloomberg ran this story. Oil tankers go dark to sneak more Gulf barrels through Hormuz. Off the coast of Oman over the weekend, 16 tankers clustered together to transfer millions of barrels of oil that have been stranded in the Persian Gulf. A month ago, that area had been entirely empty. So what is Bloomberg talking about? Well, tanker trackers back on June 8th posted this. This weekend saw a lot of dark ship-to-ship transfers of oil in the Middle East. It's not Iranian oil. Instead, this is oil coming from Iran's Arab neighbors. Yet another reason why oil isn't $200 a barrel right now. All right, those images show ships skin to skin, side to side, transferring oil. Now, the reason we're calling this a dark fleet is this is not the Russian dark fleet that is trying to avoid sanctions. This is a dark fleet that is going dark on AIS. And now we're seeing those ships doing very similar things to what dark fleet vessels do, and that is do transfers. Now, the question becomes, wait a minute, why are you doing a ship-to-ship transfer out in the Gulf of Oman? And this is where some of those pieces began to come together. Under the Bloomberg story, they started talking about the fact that they are running select vessels through the straits. Now, the issue here is what ships are you running through the straits? You've got to provide protection for them, and it appears that the U.S. is doing it. The recent AH-64 Apache that got shot down may have been on patrol in the Strait of Hormuz or that general region and part of one of these operations. The ships in question that are being used to shuttle oil in and out of the Strait of Hormuz would require war risk insurance. And you would have to go out and get that in the commercial market. Now, I did make an error in my tweet the other day. I talked about the fact that maybe this is where that DFC, the insurance that was being done through the Development Finance Corporation, was being allocated. There was a statement by Administrator Carmel, head of the Maritime Administration, talking about war risk contracts being signed. And I was trying to figure out who's getting war risk contracts because ships aren't moving through the Strait of Hormuz. Well, this could be part of that, although I did find from a broker that no, that ships are getting commercial war risk insurance out on the open market, and it's very pricey, very expensive, but they're getting it. What appears to be happening is that the oil is being moved by ships of national shipping lines, specifically 3 of them. So this is Sea Searcher from Lloyd's List, and I pulled up the 3 major companies that I think are involved here. There are 2 of them mentioned in the Bloomberg story, but I think another one is also involved. So the first one is ADNOC. This is the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. And you can see their cluster of tankers both inside the Persian Gulf and outside the Persian Gulf. And what you're seeing is ships are running to and from there. They're actually coming into the Gulf of Oman to load. Now, they could be loading in Fujairah at the pipeline, absolutely true, but that pipeline can only move 1.5 million barrels a day, not enough to load all the tankers we're seeing coming out. You have the Kuwaiti Oil Tanker Company. Now, Kuwait's got a batch of tankers, including some very large crude carriers that are stuck inside the Strait of Hormuz. But we also see a cluster of them outside the Strait of Hormuz. And what's interesting is we just saw an announcement of Kuwait fixing contracts to export oil, reopening wells and starting the flow again. They would only be doing that if they knew they had an access to get oil out of the Persian Gulf. And the last is Nakilat Shipping, which is part of Qatar. Qatar owns a piece of this. This is the liquefied natural gas exporting firm for the nation of Qatar. So that kind of leads into another piece of evidence that is out there. And these are a series of posts by Amina Bakar, who is the Middle East expert for Kepler. Kepler is a data analytical firm. They operate marine traffic, for example. And she's been posting some really interesting comments here. So, for example, on June 9th, she posted this: covert tanker operations have successfully cracked Kuwait's 2-month export freeze, triggering a significant inventory draw at Mina Al Hamadi as operators turn to dark transits to bypass regional maritime blockades. Now, what we've been seeing happening here is that ships have been loading at docks in Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar. I mean, these are, you hadn't seen these in a while. And all of a sudden, we're starting to see fixtures. These are contracts for oil exports. You see this post: a 7th vessel carrying Qatari LNG is understood to have transited the Strait of Hormuz, with Kepler data showing the vessel currently tracking toward Pakistan's Port Kazim, a development that could affect the outcome of a spot tender issued by state-owned Pakistan LNG Limited that closes today. 7th vessel is significant. There was none coming out for quite a while. Then all of a sudden in May, we started to see Qatar LNG begin to move. And then finally, you get this: since early May, Kepler has tracked roughly 96 million barrels of confirmed non-Iranian crude oil exports through either direct Strait of Hormuz transits or Gulf of Oman export networks, including cargo still loading. Total flows exceed 100 million barrels, broadly consistent with Trump's claim that more than 100 million barrels reach global markets during this period. So it appears to me that what the United States is doing is kind of what they did to bring out the Fairfax Alliance and CS Anthem, and now are doing this operation for these commercial ships, specifically targeting state-owned tankers, but also other ships coming out. We are seeing some bulkers and other vessels making the voyage out. Now, the number of ships coming out is probably not huge, and this is the big problem. We know back in March, for example, an order went out to activate reservists. These are strategic sea lift officers who would serve as tactical advisors on board the ships. We're talking about single-digit numbers. So on board a ship, you would need secure communication. You would need embarked marine detachments to target drones coming at you. You would need air cover. So probably not massive numbers of ships coming out. President Trump talked about 22 coming out. That may have been one of the largest numbers to have come out. But again, we are not anywhere near where we were pre-war. Remember, 138 ships daily went through the Strait of Hormuz, both in and out. 20 million barrels of oil came out on a daily basis. If we have gotten 100 million barrels out, that is, again, 5 days worth of pre-war oil. If you subtract out the pipelines at Yanbu and Fujairah, maybe 7 days we're getting out, because we're getting about 4.5 million out of Yanbu, a million and a half out of Fujairah. This is important, but I am not exactly sure this is keeping oil prices down. I'm not an expert on that. What I am telling you, but, is that this military operation is underway. We're seeing this. Remember, what we're not seeing, and this is a big caveat because we've heard this repeatedly, is that the U.S. Navy is not sending its warships back into the strait. U.S. Central Command just posted this claim. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps claims that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. Truth, commercial ships are continuing to transit in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. Why would CENTCOM be saying that unless they're participating in this operation? Let's go to marine traffic and break all this down for you. What's going on in the Strait of Hormuz? So you have multiple issues going on at the same time. So in the center part of the strait, it is closed. We believe this is the area that the Iranians have mined. This is where the traditional passages are done. The Iranians have established the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, saying that they control the area leading into, through, and out of the Strait of Hormuz. And they are routing ships up through their territorial waters. This is between Qishim and Larak Island and just south of Larak Island. And those ships are supposedly paying a toll of somewhere around $2 million to go in. Now, the U.S. is allowing these ships to come in and out as long as they're not stopping and loading at Iranian ports. So if you load in a Gulf Coast port, you're good. You can go in the Gulf country ports, load, and come out. However, if you are paying that toll, you are going to be hit by sanctions by the United States government under Operation Economic Fury. The U.S. is conducting a blockade which runs from the Iranian-Pakistan border here down to the northeast coast of Oman. And what they're doing is stopping ships from going in and out that are going either to Iranian ports or from Iranian ports. And the U.S. has taken recently to targeting ships with their F-18 Hornets using Hellfire missiles, and just recently did an attack on a Palau flag vessel that has killed 3 Indian crew members. I'm going to talk about this in some detail in my weekly recap. So the U.S. blockade is in force. Now we have this mission clandestinely moving ships along the southern edge here of the Strait of Hormuz, just north of Oman. Out here, ships are coming off the coast of Oman, conducting these ship-to-ship transfers, and then those tankers are heading outbound while the ships that carry the oil through the Strait of Hormuz are being escorted back in. What we don't know is the volume. President Trump mentioned 22 ships in one night. We don't know if that's 22 ships coming out, 22 ships going in. We don't know how they're clustered. We just don't know enough about the details about this, and I don't expect to hear too much unless we get a Pentagon briefing in which General Kane comes out and releases more information from us, potentially at the beginning of next week. But what we do know is that oil is coming out based on data we're getting from tanker trackers that are seeing these ship-to-ship transfers take place, through open source intelligence, through satellite imagery, Kepler that is monitoring commodities movement onto the global stage. They are tracking 100 million barrels of oil roughly entering on the global stage. We are seeing that happen. But again, that's nowhere near enough oil to make up for the donut hole that has been created in the export of oil since February 28th. You're getting 20 million barrels a day out typically, and this has been going on for over 100 days. So, I mean, we're talking about 2 billion barrels of oil that is basically missing from the global market. And 100 million is great, but it's nowhere near that entire number. As I mentioned, these aha moments do happen, and you kind of fit all the pieces together. In my research for a book I'm working on shipping during World War I was having a big issue because I was reading these memoirs and looking at these reports from these admirals and senior people in charge. And what becomes absolutely clear is one thing you learn is everybody doesn't tell all the truth. And we have good examples of that going on currently. But every now and then there are nuggets of truth, and it's the nuggets of truth which are the hard ones because you have to figure out what's the context for that. President Trump talked about ships coming out, talked about 100 million barrels, and it appears that that is matching up with the data. I am not condoning this. I'm not saying that this is right or wrong. What I am telling you is just how the evidence fits together. I have been called MAGA yesterday, and that I have Trump derangement syndrome at the same time, which kind of tells me I am in the sweet spot, and I'm going to keep aiming for that sweet spot all the time. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so be